What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of from the last week or so. It's been a really, really busy week this week, and I'm really excited for today's show. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into the news. What's happening,
Dom,
man?
it's great to see you. It looks
Great
like
to not be in
you were
108-degree
successful.
weather, so that's good.
I'm telling you, man, it was definitely rough conditional weather from Texas. I think they definitely brought us all the Texas heat they could bring us. It was like
Yes,
being in
they
a hair
did.
dryer. It's it was great though, and I'm really excited to dig into that in general with our guest that's coming on about the event that you and I both went to, because I think we both and also JP brought out some real insights kind of into what was changing in our world and what we saw at that conference. It was great. Let's get started with some bad news. Dom, you and I and Mackenzie all got together 4 or 5 weeks ago
A while
and
back,
said
yeah.
this move it thing is going to be a real problem, we're not wrong. We have another three new move it bugs. And what I think I want people to take away from this is when you have code, you've built some function, you've then built another function, you've then tied them together in some form or fashion, whether in a straight line or whether they're referencing each other, all of these different things. And when there's a bug in that, the thing that was the mistake that was made there is often made again and again and again. You can go back to our episode with Jim Manico, who's an expert on this, right, Dom? But,
Right.
does it surprise you that we found more bugs as we continue to poke on this?
I'll be honest, I had this alert cross my phone for this particular article, and I kind of had a chuckle. It's like, man, this is just a constant news cycle of we found another thing and move it. Oh, we found another thing and move it. So it was a nail hit on the head, and software like this does tend to be in sensitive environments that are also at such a scale that they tend to be antiquated and need tools like this. So I'm not shocked at all. The tough thing about this is we tell everyone to patch it, and now we have to keep telling you to patch it again or do this remediation or this, that, and the other.
And there's human steps to these patches, right? One of the shocking things to me when I was reading a remediation of one of these vulnerabilities they came out with was stop IIS, so net stop IIS service, right? And then now I want you to go in and remove this file by hand, but you can't just rename it. You have to remove it because it's still in the directory to still be vulnerable if they probe it and find it with like dirbuster or something, or dirb or whatever they use, right? So, but and then no, that's starting back up. Like you can't automate that. You can't get that to a stage where this is reliably going to happen as some methodology of patching. Like it's in my hands to fail.
Like,
come on, I could do that in PowerShell in a few seconds. Like I can't imagine this is outside of that capability. So it's just, to me, I don't want to bash any company. That's not the intention. I think it's a call to action of you need to have great coding practices. You need to work to a great CI/CD pipeline and capabilities of having this flow of how, and even if you're waterfall, I'm not trying to bash on a specific methodology, but my point being, you need to have the ability to have security thought about from the very, very beginning and continuously tested and improved. And once you find common things, find them way back. But if you're running this software right now and you don't have a WAF in front of it and real tight controls on who accesses it, I think you should be reconsidering how or why you're using that on a constant basis.
The WAF is a web application firewall, for the record.
Oh, that's right.
Touché. Still your acronym count.
Sorry. That's two. I don't often miss them, so that's 1 point for Dom in the fictitious point land, I suppose, if we were there. The auditors get extra points for being there constantly today, man. You must be under high scrutiny. So
they are
crushing
it here today.
Let's move on to the next article before I fall off this podium and break my neck. All right. So this is actually a throwback, a real throwback for me. I actually saw this today, and I was like, man, I can't believe this is still something coming up. So for anybody out there watching or in the chats, like, are you familiar with this, right? With this Silk Road from back in the day, but it was one of the first real huge marketplaces operating completely on the dark web. And it was for buying illicit things. There was this really amazing story about an FBI agent that was also corrupt, but involved with the guy that ran it. And, great stories came out of that, podcast, books, all kinds of stuff. But it seems like there's just yet another person that has been arrested for this, a 61-year-old Canadian citizen known as Variety Jones that was an advisor to Ross Ulbricht that was in charge of the whole operation. and into all aspects of the enterprise, according to prosecutors. Ulbricht describes Clark as a real mentor who inspired him and helped him to build a brand that people can come to trust. I just wanted to add some lightheartedness into this. If you haven't read this article, it's great. It does show you that what's always dark on the dark web doesn't always stay on the dark web. And I think it's this kind of constant reminder that, technology can be traced back to you. The things you do and the actions you take that are illicit can be tracked back. And we're seeing that with the Department of Justice clawing back assets, right, from criminals and cyber actors. We're starting to see a lot of that play out. But here we have an actual sentencing of somebody 20 years in prison and a $1.6 million fine for distributing massive quantities of narcotics, as quoted in the indictment, it seems.
That's what Silk Road was, right? It was the first online drug marketplace. Like it's
yeah.
Well, not the first one, but the most famous one on the dark web. I can't believe, I thought it was dead, gone. But, hey.
Long time ago. Yes. This was a long time ago. So, anyways, anytime the producers' faces look that scared, I'm terrified that something's wrong. So as long as we're good there, the thumbs up from my producer crew in there. Y'all can hear us and everything. Okay, we're good. Just want to make sure. Let's go on to the next article, because this is actually kind of a continuation, but its timing is only a few months after the initial piece, right, with the Carnegie Mellon presentation by Jen Easterly from CISA, where she kind of unveiled this kind of concept. And I'm super summarizing. There's definitely tons of things in here that we're not delving into, but it is the beginnings of this secure by design and secure by default. And I want to take just a second to talk about what is secure by design. Well, it's not having code that has multiple regression failures as we try to patch one problem. It's having the understanding of trying to have secure code design and testing and understanding. And I'm not trying to minimize the impact of something novel someone found that you couldn't have planned for in the way you coded. I'm not trying to beat those people up. It's really more people that don't have process in the way that they do this, and that they have integrated security requirements and things at a very early stage in the code, and understanding of sensitivity of the data they touch, and all of the things, right? All of the things that go into it. But I do want to say that the secure by design, secure by default was initially proposed through CISA and a White House initially piece without any real roadmap. Have you had any time to dig into this at all, Dom, and kind of see the National Cybersecurity Strategy roadmap that's just been released from the White House? I think it was on the 13th, so just yesterday.
Man, there's a lot of words in there, but I've done the good old-fashioned cursory review. Yeah. And for me, I think this is the fastest I've ever seen something remotely actionable come out of a natty strategy. Like normally it's it's a showpiece, right? And I feel like there's some action being done here to push it perhaps beyond the confines of the federal government and the strategies that come out of DHS and CISA when some of these come out. So I'm excited to see the progress, and I will dig fully through it. But the fact that it's here is positive news for me.
And some friends of mine that have reviewed this and looked at it too come away thinking, I guess, this same abject belief in constant waiting, I guess. And they said there's just no carrot, there's no why, nothing's really been set in stone, they haven't built anything. And what I do like about this is, they say it is unusually specific and prescriptive, assigning near-term deadlines for 69 initiatives. I think the point I like to focus on is the positive aspect, which is they've now realized this is going to be thousands of bytes. This is going to be get through this next initiative that empowers and makes possible the next thing we might need to do. And some of the things that I see in here are the laying of groundwork for codification of terms that we're going to be using, of being able to lay that legal precedent that needs to exist to ever start setting legislation and bodies of things as we go forward. And they're talking about this plan as a living document, Walden says, right? That it's going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to move and change this. And I think that's what I would care about seeing more than anything else, is that we can in some way systematize and operationalize an effort to fix all of the stuff we've made, to get things to where we are on some degree of a pace where capitalism rewards people that take security seriously when they make software. And some of the things that were stated in the initial body of work really said, we need to move the risk up. Capitalism often bears its risks upon the lowest member of that society while building extreme profits above it. And all we're saying is we need Toyota to have the airbags on when they ship the car to me. We need to make sure that it's at least been tested once or twice, right? We want to make sure that basic hygienic aspects go into the money that goes into the metal that goes into the car. Like it's the basics, and we don't have that in cyber hygiene today, right? And so, anyways, I don't want to beleaguer the point, but I would say if you're an MSP watching this, or if you're interested in cybersecurity as a small to mid-sized business, paying attention to how the broadcast message from White Houses, and not just this one, but the next one and the next one, often set the stage for how you take this new problem. It's not that new to all of us that live in this industry, but it's new in the basis of, to a governmental entity, and then come up with a plan and a strategy for us dealing with it both legally, operationally, all of the things. But Dom, any thoughts on this before we kind of wrap up this last news article? Also, we will flash to a view of this real quick. For the actual article, this fact sheet that came out from White House as kind of a summative piece, along with the actual document, are what they're talking about here. And it's all found kind of in our show notes chat down at the bottom in the description. So Claire will take care of that for you if you want to go read this. But Dom, any thoughts on this?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And this is my skepticism anytime one of these comes out is, what are we actually going to do about it, right? The White House and the people in the White House don't get to say how we do things. They get to make a suggestion and say, please do things this way, with the hope that we're actually going to make that innovation and move in that direction. So I'm a huge fan of pretty much all of the points in the strategy. I'm a really huge fan of finally exploring ways to shift the liability, like you said, to reward giving a damn about the security of your product, because I do believe there are vendors out there that just do not care, right? And I think incentivizing
I like
them
to think they're ignorant of the challenge, and not that they don't care. I don't want to say that. I think companies are rightfully in pursuit of profit. I think that is the right thing of what capitalism does reward, and you have to lean into that. It's that they're not educated enough. They haven't chosen to help themselves understand those next steps. But I don't want to say they don't care, I guess, in my opinion. But the one last thing that I do love is she goes on to say, Walden goes on to say that the Chinese hackers exploitation, and Microsoft, that's been coming out recently and talked about as an immediately collaborative effort, goes on to say this is exactly what's at the heart of the strategy, and frankly at the heart of any implementation plan, is this collaboration with public sector and private sector. And I think that's something that's been all too lacking to understand the breadth of the problem at a government entity understanding. So I'm excited by that. So I really like that we got to cover this a little long. We did run on just a bit, but let's hear some brilliant words from Robin Harris, and then we will be right back.
Here's something a lot of people don't think about when they're switching tools. And for audit, it can become a problem. Because if you know anything about like a SOC 2 audit, type 2, or a SOX audit, or an ISO audit, your audit spans a certain period. Now, what happens if you switch tools that are in scope in the middle of that period, and you don't pull your data out and store it someplace? When the auditor says, can you give me blah, blah, blah from 7 months ago? You'll be like, well, we moved from this tool to that tool, and we didn't keep the data. And guess what? That becomes a finding, because they cannot validate that the control was functioning. For all they know, it could have been functioning terribly, but because there's no data, they can't prove it one way or another. So that's the thing. For business continuity, you need to make sure if it's data that you need to have through a certain period of time, there is data. They like financial data and legal documents and contracts that you need to pull out of the old system and put somewhere, or either put it into the new system. You need to really think about, do I need this data to be persistent from one system to the other? And that's something a lot of people don't think about. So when you're offboarding a product, this is when you need to have that conversation. Do we need to save this data, a portion of this data? Do we have legal obligations to keep some of this data? Do we have audit requirements that require us to keep this data? Do we have business needs that we may need to reference this data? If you do, you got to pull that data out and put it somewhere where you can get your hands on it. So that's just a little bit more about data. Data is like this whole big subject. We do so much with data. We have, data lakes and all this other kind of stuff, because data can really inform how your business strategies unfold. Data can equal money. So you want to think about that.
Man, I love me some ramen. That was a very important point.
Well, if they were playing
you said it in the green room or in the background, and you said shoot yourself in the foot if you inadvertently change vendors in a way you shouldn't, right? So
yeah, really I was definitely fired up by her message on this one today, for sure.
Yeah.
So who do we have coming on today, Dom?
Oh man, we thought this was his first show with us, and we were really disappointed in ourselves that we didn't get him on here until now. But it turns out he was on our actual first or second show when we started the game. First or second live show.
Super early.
So Claire has a much better memory than us, which is fantastic. But we want to welcome JP Keesy, but we want to welcome him in a very special way because we caught this really fun, candid moment on an iPhone, shot on an iPhone at XChange.
With so these hands, roll that clip, they're great.
With those hands, yes.
Let's do it.
That's how you start off a stage presentation, right there in Texas.
Yes, it is.
And it was Texas hot too, wasn't it, JP?
It was Texas hot. The heat index was incredibly hot. It kept sprinkling a little bit here and there, so it was really bad. But yeah, Texas through and through for
sure. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you up front, we're having some mic issues, it sounds like. So this could be fun with us for the audience, JP. But you know what's great about that? 2 or 3 times in the last, maybe 5 times, JP and I don't run into each other. We've run each other over, and JP's gotten to win because, I'm the more gracious one, of course. And JP may not win today, it seems. That sounds great.
Oh, it'll be okay. I promise not to overtalk you or talk too much or chime in, with a bunch of words that nobody quite understands.
That's fair. That's a fair retort, and you're not inaccurate. It's an absolute truism. So I love you so much. Anyways, if y'all don't know, JP and I get the benefit of talking through problems. In fact, through all of COVID, JP and I were on the same call every week, talking about life's problems, dealing with our stresses, in some ways dealing with it as a support group. And so we've both helped each other in so very many ways over the last few years. So I'm very honored to have you here. And I also respect your opinion. And that's the reason I want you to be here. And I want you to be just as honest as what I know and love. And you're not wrong. I make up words about a third of the time. But in reality, every word was made up. And after that, it's a popularity contest. So, that's what I'm working on. But
you can just add it to is all they do. And then it becomes a real word.
That's fair. That's exactly it. Literal doesn't mean literal anymore. But, tell everybody for the audience, who are you and what do you do, brother?
JP Keesy. I own a small little MSP down here in Fort Worth, Texas. We have a saying over here in Fort Worth. We like to joke with our sister next door, Dallas, and we say life is too short to live in Dallas. But in all fairness, it's a love-hate relationship. We're a little slower over here, and they get some stuff done and get done. So, yeah. MSP, we've been in business since about the late 90s. My business partner and I decided to put the two together and give the opportunity of people to break into this industry, which is still kind of difficult today because everybody wants experience. And we made that kind of our mission, was to allow people to have a place to build. And then we utilize that to help small and medium businesses grow. So that's been a mission and a passion of ours since the beginning. And let's see, August will be officially 20 years as F1 Information Technologies, F1 IT for short. And that's been a real exciting roller coaster of a ride. And there's a lot of stories that can spin out of that for sure, from sheer joy and happiness to scared out of our bejeebies and not wanting to even wake up the next morning. So and everything in between, every emotion you can think of. So it's been fun. So there's about 17 of us right now. We're hiring process of trying to get about
Almost
4
17.
more.
Is there some fractional aspect to that, or
Well, one of our accounting ladies has gone part-time, so I don't
ah,
count her necessarily as
huh.
full-time,
Eggs on
although
my face?
Yeah.
many years she decided she helped us for pennies on the dollar. She just wanted to help and be a part of this. So she's
That's
definitely
awesome.
someone who has helped us get to where we are. Definitely a alumni, and we can talk about that later. But yeah, so we're short about 4 people. We're trying to get those spots filled. This last year and a half have been remarkable. Been really, really good. We've changed up a few things. Matt, you and I, Don, we've got to talk about a little bit of what those changes are, and it's been good. It's been good. So that's us.
Yeah, man. One of the things that I think I heard out of that is everybody that seems to get into this business, at least in the last 20 years as an MSP, started because they wanted to build something beautiful. They wanted to help somebody use technology and understand the value of technology in the way that we do, right? And what we do. Is that
Right.
a fair statement for you as well? You said mission, which always tells me somebody's down that path.
It's very fair. Everyone I talk to that's in the same age bracket or have been in this industry long as it has a lot of the same similar stories of how they got started and how they progressed through all of this as well.
Well, let's pivot that, right? So you and I
Sure.
and Dom, all three of us, at least best of my recollection, we're all in Dallas for XChange and got in, I think, Sunday, at least to some degree. I think Dom, you got in a day later. But tell me about how XChange Security sets up and does what they do, and then we'll kind of get into some questions I've got for you. But tell me about XChange for anybody that doesn't know.
So this was actually my first XChange Security to attend. I think it was because of you and Dom and the exposure that you guys created with Ride a Boom that made me make sure I went to one of these security conferences to see what this is about. I was pleasantly surprised, a little disappointed in some areas, but for the most part, I definitely think it's something that everyone should be attending at least one very focused security conference as opposed to some of the larger conferences that we tend to have all met at and have grown through the rest, the tenure that we've been in business. So
Yeah. I think for some of the things that I want to dig into, you said there's some positives, and then you said there's some
yes.
things that were negatives. So maybe we start with some of the positives and help me understand what your takes were, especially now that I know this was a first time going to it. I don't know how many years they've been doing the dedicated XChange Secure. I think it may only be 2.
I think this
Maybe
was
it's
the
3. I don't
second
want to
year. I think
shortchange them.
Reston was the
Yeah,
first, wasn't it?
I
Actually,
think it
don't remember.
was. Yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure
I
this
think
is
it
the second
was.
one.
I'm not willing to bet like $1 million, but I'd put like $100 on it probably. So
All right,
if anybody's,
that's fair.
if I'm
I'd take
wrong,
it. I'd take it.
but
So the positive things that I got out of it was that it was focused on security. I didn't have to
right,
decide which breakout sessions I wanted to talk about. I knew I had some expectation in the boardrooms what vendors were going to come in and pitch their product to us.
oh yeah,
The story of Robert Coffey that was touching.
Coffey.
I'm sure Keoffe, sorry, I'm sure that touched a lot of hearts. And that it didn't, it was one that really got me to thinking of where we're all heading as MSPs, MSSPs, and the cliff that we could easily fall off of. So just from a pure story that resonated with me, it made this conference worth it, and it was definitely one of the more positive things I got out of it. The humility that came out of it, and I've got
Mm-hmm.
to tell you, from the progression of all of these conferences in the last couple of decades, yeah, and us kind of getting our golden nuggets around the coffee bar or the adult beverage coffee bar, if you know what I mean. That is something that I've noticed progress from a humility standpoint, that we're all not necessarily quite as confident, outstanding as we used to be. We're not afraid a lot of times to say, "Hey, I'm vulnerable in this particular area or not." And by the way, have you heard of this vendor? So
Yeah,
that type of stuff. That's what I really was hoping to get out of the conference. Kind of what you guys have these, and it did not disappoint at all.
That's awesome. I do want to double. I don't want to say that. That's terrible. I want to talk about something. Drill in. What other euphemism or colloquialism we have to use to get down there? But one of the things that you talked about was Robert Chiaffi. I actually I was straight until I called him Robert Coffey once, and so I try not to do that. But no, Robert Chiaffi is a brilliant guy. He and I co-chair what's called the emergency response team with CompTIA. We are both among a group of about 10 of us that have all been touched in that way, as he described on stage, that have all been through that post-traumatic stress, that have all been through those moments to varying degrees of that just utter failure, and utter letting down what I talked about being building something beautiful, knowing that I was a part of kicking their sandcastle in, right? So just understand that that's what drove us all to build that team, ERT. But Robert tells the story at XChange Security, and he's told it now. I've seen it about 5 times. He's really honed it. He's better at it. He's better at the imagery, all of it. But his story is really just walking you through the moments of the day when his partner walked up to him at 10:49 a.m., at 12:30 p.m. when he discovered it, of the death and demise of about $1 million in revenue. But if you really boil it down, it is his friends or the sandcastles he built for them to have their beautiful day. And he was part of them being destroyed because of something he couldn't control. But now we're all aware of it and we can. And so you have this unique piece of Robert really always does. I'll make this shameless plug for Robert. We need to have him on the show. I think he's been on. We've had too many people on now. I feel terrible, but Robert tells the story so well. And at the end of it, his call to action is probably the most poignant call to action that I believe in at my very soul. And I think that's what you and I work so well together, Dom and JP, is community. The answer is, how did he survive that? 5 people brought him bread and took care of his people and came in and did work for him and helped him restore computers without any understanding of their own legal peril, without any understanding of the stress and the post-traumatic stress that they were about to place on their people. Because believe it or not, when you're restoring a computer next to a business owner who can't pay the bills and doesn't know where the money that's going to come in from the cash flow because of the loss of their operations for their employees, they're crying and they don't feel good. And so anyways, but yeah, Robert does a good job of making people that haven't experienced that think about that as an outcome they do not want. So I agree with you. That was such a highlight. It was worth digging into. But anyways.
Yeah, and that you said the point that I was trying to make was that the community aspect of all of these conferences have really brought so many people together. And it was really odd to hear. I think it was Pax8 actually that has done a little bit of studies on how many MSPs attend some of these things, and it's a much smaller fraction than I thought would be. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done to get them to come to these events and to be a part of these communities.
Yeah, that's actually probably a fantastic call out to think about, right? Like, if you're thinking about the ones that I regularly see consuming this content, right, and the ones that I regularly know are there, they're X thousandth of 29,000 just in North America, right? Or whatever the number is, right. That's just our current partner base or so. But I mean, if you think about that, there's just, yeah, you're right. There's a very small portion of those that are even coming in drinking from this fire hose. Not to mention that, what's it like when you go through these kind of boardrooms? Can you kind of talk me through, what works, what helps you learn something, and then what doesn't, and maybe even just the boardroom structure in general, like help people understand what you went through this week.
That might be a little bit more on the negative side of some of the things that I took away.
Well, that was not my intention, but we'll go there.
But we'll start with the positive pieces. So the positive pieces of these boardrooms in the way that at least the channel company does it, and I think Beyond is getting part of it, and other ones that I've seen and gone to and been blessed to be a part of, is that it's that community sense. It's that one ability to bring a specific agenda to, whether it's just one vendor, and then we have a few minutes afterwards or around the pool or the bar afterwards to really talk about that one vendor and what they bring, and let somebody praise them and lift them up a little bit. But again, I mean, we're all talking about one very, very specific thing that I've been kind of rallying around for about a year and a half now, which is to be grateful in everything. And communities that these is all bringing, we all seem to be humble and grateful to be a big part of. Even in the smallest way, we're a big part of that community. So those boardrooms bring it all together. the vendor aspect of it, it gives them the ability to have a very focused group of individuals who are either using their product, thinking about using their product, but almost always using that particular subset of products somewhere in their stack. And
Yeah.
from every one of them, whether I use them or not, I took some golden nugget away, whether it was, hey, I need to implement that because I know they carry the product I am
You
using,
know what?
I'm able to use, or also this is where I'm able to talk over him every once in a while, in case
That's
anybody
perfect.
was wondering.
That's the intention.
But also some of the messaging that they have the opportunity to give us to take back to the CEOs, the CFOs. Matt, you and I have talked
Mm.
extensively about the changes that need to be made in playing with that type of audience. That the influence they have at that particular point can be so much utilized so much better. Let's just put it that
Dom, one of the things that you and I talked about for, I don't know, 7, 8 hours over this last
Yeah.
3 days was this one concept that we're seeing. And it's that I feel like, and this is to JP's point, I actually hadn't made this realization to right now. So JP gets like this virtual point as well thing, right? But it's this understanding that I feel the reason, in my opinion, why we're seeing this much collaboration, the humbleness, the community drive, the ask to change, the talking about the problems we see, trying to be humble. In fact, we love nothing more when a vendor goes, hey, I have this problem and I'm fixing it. And I know it's there and I'm going to solve. We love that. We're seeing this transparency in this community space. But I think the action reason is this one thing. We like to fix things. Robert said that in his keynote. He was a fixer. He fixed vacuum cleaners for his mom. He'd help. He was a fixer. He wanted to make things right. We know things aren't right now. When it comes to cybersecurity, there's so many things I could speak for hours and hours and hours on it. But I think what's interesting is because of that community drive to dig in, be humble, say what you don't know, learn from others, tell people when you think they're wrong, grow the community base being applied out, you're seeing this growth in the MSP's maturity as a whole because of that humbleness. They're not sticking to old ideas and saying, no, that'll never. They're going, how do I fix this? We're getting punched in the face. We're seeing the insurance companies have issues. We're having clients not hire us. They're seeing all that and they're growing. So Dom, this is where I was going to ask you after, it takes me 7,000 words to ask you something, but what have we seen happen with the maturity of MSPs and what stood out to you the most during being at these boardrooms and presenting?
That's the question, right? And I think we've agreed that we think this is the second year of XChange Security, right? And if that's true, then I've been to all the XChange Securities. So yay for me.
Touche.
I measure
one maybe outside in our numbers, let's say. Maybe one if it was to be that. 2/3 then you've attended.
So then I measure my success at these events not by the number of people I speak to or present to, rather. It's the number of hands I shake, right? The number of real conversations I get to have. Because that's when we can strip away all the shiny white paper stuff. We just talk to other humans. And at this one, I realized the level of maturity of the people I got to talk to was so much higher than the level of maturity at Reston last year. And my favorite part of that statement is a lot of them were the same people, right? So that the amount of growth we saw in about 12 months of the understanding of where we're at, the understanding that some things are broken, some things maybe aren't broken. And the conversations were about, hey, how are we making progress here? And what are we doing here? And, how do you help me there? And how do I help you here? And that community was there, and that just sheer growth and capability and maturity was definitely my favorite part of the entire experience.
And I'm going to go to JP with a question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that came from the humility piece of it as they're starting to really, they become more mature in their business and listening. What is it? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Is that the phrase that I've heard before? And they tend to listen a little bit more these days. And it's from folks like you guys that are bringing out additional and really heartfelt content, very specific content, things that we can grasp and we consume. There may be 5 or 6 of you guys talking on a webinar about the exact same thing, but not everybody is going to consume it the same way. So I don't mind to a couple of different events that have the same vendors, that have the same folks at it, but maybe it's a different marketing team that's coming into that room and showing you or talking to you, because you're going to have that ability to consume it a little differently. I don't like reading books. I can listen, get a lot more out.
I agree with you. JP, I think the word you just said there is one of the things I think is changing. I think that statement of that marketing person coming in the room is something that we're seeing as a delta. And here's what I'll say that I really believe that about 2 years ago, a conference kicked off that in my mind was a seminal moment in our industry of the way we educate people at conferences. And that was at Write a Boom 2 years ago. I think you've seen the industry change to adapt. This is my opinions, right? But I think you've seen the industry adapt to this fact that the MSP is maturing rapidly. And that now the flashy things that would normally sell aren't the answer. We have to come in with the actual meat behind this flashy slide that says, I'm going to do this. How? Tell me how. Show me how. I have enough knowledge now to ask you how. And so I think what we're seeing is a drift to where, and I'll ask your opinion on this, JP, do you feel that companies that don't come in with the sole mind of education, now it might be self-serving education around what you need to understand around the risk or around that, but people that come in that pitch a product versus educating you on something that they believe you need more context on, educating you on something they believe you need to know that you do not know, or having some way of educating through some demonstrable aspect of what they do to tie it into this kind of kinesthetic understanding of what the solve is. People that don't come in and educate, do they fail in these boardrooms now? Is that one of the things you're seeing?
The short answer is yes. Everything you just said hits home with me and a lot of the peers that we talk to on an everyday basis. And it's the education piece of it. I asked somebody, it may have been you two, but asked somebody, I said, who is the ultimate audience that all of this is going to? It's all of our end users. It's the CEOs, the CFO, the account managers or the manager of that particular client partner. And it's them that are going to have to consume this. And so we have to find a way to educate them of the risk.
Brilliant.
You know, because risk isn't going away. It's not, you can't just shove it aside or anything. I think it was somebody in one of the boardrooms in your team that even
really
had
loud. Yeah, I don't know if he's accurate, but he's really loud.
So that is one of those. No, he's not too loud, but the point driven that everything you just said, you made me get a little tongue tied here, but it had a little bit about that risk on kind of where that risk needs to lie and what decisions need to be made around that risk. And that's what I've been trying to do, is to educate those C-level suite folks to say, and look, here's the questions that you need to go back to your leadership team and start asking. You don't need to understand it. You just need to have a smart question to go back. So if the new sales way of doing things can educate us to where we're asking smarter questions and we're getting the right answers back, we can in turn take that back to our client partners and ask those questions or play some tabletop with them. And it gets their mind juices flowing and they're going, okay, I get this. You are a serious value added. I think I need you in my strategic business planning.
100%.
So anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. Clean it up for me.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that the ultimate audience of everything we're saying to you guys is your customers, and that goes for all vendors, right? And I've said that, we have this whole this sales methodology at Pax8, I'll call it. I don't know what it's technically called, but and it lays out these pillars, and anytime I have to present it, I say, this is not for us, right? This is for you. This makes it possible for everyone on our team to be able to give you something you can tell your customers. And I really mean that, because I ran an MSP before this, and that's how I talk to my customers. What are your business challenges, right? I don't care about your technical challenges, because your technical challenges are creating a business challenge. I would much rather reverse engineer it.
But that's it right there.
We've talked about that kind of stuff for a few years, and I think the challenge has been we don't necessarily know exactly how to go back to our client partners and regurgitate that. Right. If the new sales way, they're giving us something to go back in a good way of doing that, and it's definitely golden.
I hadn't made that connection, JP. I got to give you another point. Like you're the only 2-point guest I've ever had, I think. But this is another one of those things where I hadn't made that correlation. I'm teaching you, but you're right. I'm teaching you to secure. I'm teaching you how to understand the context around something. I'm teaching you how to deal with it. But it is in the lens of business, and it's in the lens of money, and it's in the lens of how things. I hadn't made the correlation that that's the exact thing you need to be teaching them. And I know that sounds stupid that I didn't, but I'll tell them myself. I'm actually, especially when you think about what we covered. Dom and I got together for about an hour or so and said, what are we going to talk about in this? How are we going to discuss this in something meaningful? And what we came up with is, I want to set the stage that people are thinking about risk the wrong way, right? And I think in that conversation, we talked about businesses start to take a risk and for that be rewarded with profit. That is what businesses do. They make something better, but they take it upon themselves. And if they fail, they don't make a profit. For a lot of different ways, they may not make a profit. And so when you think about that, we need to talk about risk solely in the understanding of how it enables you to be smart about the risks you take so that you can continue to make those profits. And so that's what we came into the boardroom and talked about, right? Is you can do a lot of things. What can you do? Let's force Dom on the spot. What can you do with risk, right? Go ahead, Dom. Help everybody else.
It doesn't exist. Rehash. That's my favorite one to talk about, right? We missed on the graphics. We should have brought the graphics for that one, but
I wanted
it doesn't exist, right? You can avoid it.
Of it on my phone. You want me to show it?
Yeah, I did see you taking that picture. But JP, what was your takeaway from that? Did you? I think that's what you were getting at, is that you want something you can go take to an end executive and say, yeah, here's the things we get to choose to do. I'm going to start talking to you in this language. And when I talk to you about MFA, I'm going to show you where that lives in this language, right? And we're going to have that conversation in a way. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'll just read you I'll read you my notes. I put in there is,
this is awesome.
What is, and I have it right here. It says, is there anything like risk register out there? I think was the term that I heard one of y'all talk about, risk or somebody register? Talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, and then what is it? What is the risk that cannot be avoided? You can't just pass it along. What's the best way that we can transfer it or reduce it? Those two pieces of that slide just that hit me really, really hard. It's like, okay, I can build some great questions to go back to my client partners and ask them in a very unique way that doesn't make them think that I'm trying to tell them something. And that's what we also need from the vendors, being able to sit around, have a conversation, maybe take them out to lunch and something and say, look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. You don't want to say that necessarily, but let's figure out a way to ask that question. What kind of risk do you have? How do you transfer that? Ask even if it's in your own. But that's the way I think that the vendors need to come back and start, quote unquote, selling to us, is to educate us on the really good questions to ask our client.
And
so I
think
you're
really talking about is empowerment.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you're really talking about is they need to empower you to succeed. And at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. I'm teaching a man to fish, right? I'm not bringing fish. And I think that's the core piece, is for us to win this fight, for us to change this for the SMB of the United States of America and all of the markets that we serve in general, we have to empower MSPs. We can never do it in any scale without these service providers and people that can translate business for the small to mid-sized business into tech terms. And I think what you're also speaking towards, JP, in my opinion, is we have a big shift in our world happening where there's a lot of commoditization of the traditional tech, right? If I look at going from an Exchange server to going to M365, that delineation is so monumental, it makes it understandable for most people, right? But if you think about that across hundreds of decisions, it gets extremely finite where the value is being provided for an MSP in the traditional plate spinning of keeping tech alive. So we're seeing that have to shift to strategy. That's having to shift to making better decisions with the tech we use. It's having to shift to empowering, in the same right, them to make profit. At the end of the day, I think that's the sage advice that you came out with as your overall point, is everyone should always be thinking many lines down to who is that final consumer that's going to digest what's been put in up here, right? And I think that this is kind of an aha moment, actually, of just how down the rabbit hole we have to go to that. Who's the final consumer? Well, if I'm supporting this client, I need to make them more capable to go support their end consumption, right? And it doesn't stop till you get to the final consumption. So it's great thought points, man. So what were some of the negatives? You started to tease at this earlier, help our audience. We always wait and save the salacious points till the end, but what didn't work? What's there?
I'll just sum it up into one big one for me, which was just the traditional legacy way of selling to us. The lack of insight of what we need was disappointing. It didn't seem, there seemed like there were very few that had this golden opportunity to really get something out of us and really hit home. And there were a few of them that did. You know,
Sure.
I'm talking to a couple of them now already. You know, it was just a few days ago. That part was a little disappointing. Probably the largest piece of why I said there were some disappointing pieces.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's a really interesting point, though, because I think all of us in the room have been to multiple exchange events, whether or not they were just security, right? And I'm curious. So from our perspective, partners are maturing faster than we've ever seen before. I was really challenged in my boardrooms, like in the best way, right? It was fantastic to have these kind of conversations. But I guess from your perspective, if you look at the general, I don't know, is ratio the right word of vendors? Because I do think there are some key vendors doing a great job maturing and understanding this. And I'm curious from your perspective, how much or how quickly is that improving as you listen to more and more of these prezos?
I will say that I'm kind of going to shift that a little bit. So
Yeah.
one of the concerns I have of the I don't think it's maturing quite as fast as what I was hoping for, right? For my expectations, I would have thought by now that there would have been quite a bit better of listening, twice as much as than you're speaking, and get a little more in tune and listen to what we're trying to feed back to them. Hopefully, this podcast and webinar will speak to some of it. But the some of the feedback that I hear from a negative standpoint was that some of these vendors are trying to couple too many things into one agent or one solution that's going to fit as many things as it can. And my pushback to that is that I agree with that on one aspect, but there's another aspect from security, and push back on me if you want to, is that at least some of this overlapping layer, we all talk about we need to be layering our security. If one of them fails or there's an incident with one, you've at least got some backup to some pieces of that overlapping with another vendor as well. So I'm okay with either philosophy on it,
Well,
but
and here's where I'll take this one, and I'll run real quick with this, because what's great is you just introduced the ability for us to chat about this age-old challenge of, is it best in breed or best of platform, right? I think at some point of it, and I actually am a best of platform person with a clear understanding. And let's talk about what that problem is. So, Dom, what's best of breed when you're talking about selecting a tool?
It's the best of the best in that given solution set.
Exactly. So it's a very, very, very good, very, very best of the best, 99.999. Awesome at this one function. Best of platform takes this notion that the challenge with buying everything best of breed is they don't all just fit together nicely. They don't have the deep integration already done for you. They don't already have that coalescence of those two products to work together in a way that meets meaningful. And so best of breed speaks towards finding the best of one little thing, which might mean you're looking at 2 different consoles or 40, which might mean you're not able to integrate it directly to something because of either a financial tiff or a technical tiff between capabilities of those two organizations. And so best of breed is actually not my favorite go-to, unless I have a very specific solution I'm trying to solve that I needed a very, very high efficacy. I would prefer to be best of solution or best of platform, in the sense of looking at the CrowdStrikes or the SentinelOnes and the way they're trying to add these pieces to it and continue on. And those weren't the ones obviously there, but the point being in that fashion. And the reason is, and I'm not saying they do this well, this is where we have to get into secure by design, and we have to get into some of the onus being on these service providers to do this well. But the argument is they own both ends of it. They can make the plugs look the same. They can make the things flow better. They understand their data. They're generative of that data on both sides. And therefore, the outcome to the business is, even though I may have only 80% solutions across the board, those layer together in the way they work together to make me a 99% solution that's easy to manage, that I can scale, that I won't fail easily. I won't miss an agent of the 19 agents that need to be on an endpoint. So anyways, JP, add to it. Go ahead. You got your finger up.
Yeah. So I don't disagree. And I think there are some companies, you mentioned one that is doing a much better job of that. But kind of circling back around to what we were talking about of this particular security, the one aspect of what these vendors could do is listen to us as to, how to sell to us to sell back to our clients. The other aspect where I was going with that was listen to us when we want to talk about how these things need to integrate with either other solutions, best of breed, whatever your philosophy is, like what you were saying right there. But they had that opportunity to talk to us about that stuff as well, and they did not. I don't know one of them
Yeah.
that was asking about how does our one agent, our one, one hole to or throat to choke, how is it working out for you? What could we improve in this piece of it? It's an
Sure.
opportunity at these conferences to be able to do that with the mind trust that they have in front of them at that particular
Yeah. Well, and there's
And you hit
point number
another one
3.
of my
Like I'm gonna,
conference
yeah.
strategies, and when I'm having
Go
those
ahead, Dom. You
handshake
award the point on this one.
conversations after it hits me well. So when I'm having those handshake conversations, if you and I are at the bar and you're giving me some feedback, I want not the negative, the constructive time, right? If I can't come back
time.
to the office and say we're doing this wrong, then I don't want to come back and give everyone excellent feedback. There's got to be
Yeah.
something to fix somewhere. Nobody's perfect. So that's amazing. Like I love hearing feedback that gives me something to come back and work on or help someone work on. Right. That's massive.
Yeah,
That's
100%.
a humbled vendor that is allowed to take that as well.
That's it.
Yeah.
You said it. I'm done. I don't have any more words. Yeah, 100%. No, I think you're right though. But that humility and transparency, which is what has to come in kind with that, I think that is kind of the future of what has to happen in a rapidly maturing market. I've always called this my middle theory, but it's really just been a way to call it. It's just that capitalism doesn't reward something being better than the maturity of its consumer. Why would I make something better than what you're going to reward me for in financial cost back to me in profit? Right. So the point is that we're in this stage where what does a company do that's always made a wooden spoon with edges that would cut you do when the populace demands one that's polished? Right. You have to imagine that at some point they either polish them or they stop selling spiky spoons. Right. So this is kind of where we're at. And I think from a cybersecurity perspective, we just touched on how rapidly the MSP consumer, the need to even explain this to a customer, like, come on, you weren't saying that before. You were saying, how do I go
Right.
sell to my customer? Now you're saying, how do I teach my customer? How do I empower my customer? How do I explain all this crap that I barely am figuring out to my customer? And I think you're at this point where we're at this stage that demand and that rapid incline in maturity is going to continue to drive these companies to either get right or get left. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of maybe the way I see
That
this.
needs to be a T-shirt, man.
So here's another question for you guys. Do you think there's too many conferences out there right now?
Oh, you can't pull me my chain on that long of a conversation right now, JP. That'd take me 14 minutes to warm up to the conversation.
Yeah.
I do think the thirst for knowledge is drawing enough to support the load, again, just like capitalism, that people are finding enough ROI on these conferences that, yes, it seems like there are a lot of them. I think what you might be experiencing in that statement, in my opinion, is because you're one of those that does thirst for this knowledge and are seeing so much, by that proxy, you're ahead of a lot of this thought process and you're consuming so many of them that it may have not the same value as it does for a smaller consumption of those. That said, I do think everybody's trying to lean into this and teach, to your point, right? And there's tons of new stuff every day. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But it is going to be. I bring it up not necessarily to have a longer conversation, but to put that call to action to the vendors out there that are going to these to say, look, those of you that are going to do this and attend these particular conferences are probably going to be the ones that we attend the most.
Yeah. And to your point, if a conference provides value, education, drives success and empowerment, then that conference will succeed and you will have the same thing play out. Like, look at beer, right? If we look at craft beer, 3, 4, 5 years ago, craft beer was the biggest thing in the world. It still is. It's doing great. But you saw way more surplus of craft beer manufacturers that never make beer now. They are gone. They've either been bought and conglomerated or they have gone away. And so there's a reason for that. The market almost always does create this surplus of demand until that normalization occurs. And I think in this rapid increase in our knowledge space, and as that's playing out, there's probably going to be a point where 3 years from now, as we look at conferences, they're going to look maybe drastically different from a landscape of those and value they provide. And I think if you take that back without naming any names to a vendor conference that only sells their stuff and they're only driving their things, as long as they're listening to their public, and that drives those things to be the best that they can be put together, and all the things you talked about and operable and all the things that make us profit and make, at the end of the day, our customers profitable, then those will do well. If they're not doing those things, That's how capitalism works. It's beautiful. They solve themselves. And so I think that's why I'm so proud of what we put on it Beyond. If I'm allowed to gloat, I don't know if I am. I don't care. But I think it's one of those things where I think people are leaning into education first, right? And one of the things I'll say about Beyond that impressed me so much is I always love to speak at trade conferences where I have to put in a actual paper proof of something that I want to speak about, why it's valuable, and tie it in. And we have tons of people do it, and they vote on the ones that are best, and that gets on stage. That's what happened to Beyond. They took a bunch of our educators and said, hey, think about the best topics you know your people want to hear, and then let them go up on stage and nervously fight through maybe their first time on a stage that large to go educate people because they care. And I think, humble plug aside, I think the vendors that did that well at XChange probably crushed it and were evident on a lot of the awards and the things they did and what they served. And so I was very humbled for us to actually get a couple of honorable mentions and not quite one. And that tells us we need to continue to grow in how we shift our message as well, and pay attention as that continues to grow and change. So anyways,
I'll
love you
definitely
very much.
going to Beyond next year just for the.
If you're not at Beyond next year, brother, I might literally chase you down, put you in a helicopter, and drive you to Beyond. And I know you don't drive helicopters, so it's going to be dangerous. You need to just be there. It's big.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure no one drives them. I think it's a fly.
Yeah.
Well, what's that one where I put the quarter in front while I'm waiting on Cat at the grocery store? That one I drive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeehaw, indeed. I appreciate you being here, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having
to
me,
all the
guys.
production crew making this great and working through the issues. We love you all, and see y'all next time on the game. Dom, you want to close us out? Thank you, JP.
Thank you so much for joining us, JP. This has been a fantastic episode of the game. Thank you so much for coming. Don't forget to do all the algorithmy stuff, the liking, the subscribing, the sharing. I know it's an annoying plug, but we don't want you to miss an episode, and we definitely want you to share episodes with people that would benefit from them. We have an interesting week for Pax8 Live coming next week because it is Microsoft Inspire, Microsoft's big annual partner conference, and I had to pull up the notes because Claire said I'd screwed up if I didn't.
There's big announcements coming.
Big
I can't say it,
so
but there's
Tuesday,
big announcements.
Tuesday
coming
and
for some
Wednesday,
cool stuff.
4 p.m. Mountain Time. All right, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Mountain Time. Special editions of Kristen Fehrenbach's Technically Unraveled, exclusively covering what went down at Microsoft Inspire. And to Matt's point, we all signed documents that come with a lot of legal fees if we screw it up. So check out Inspire. Make sure you get those announcements, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for the reminder, Don. That was a very humble and quiet way to say that to me. I really appreciate you.
Yes.
I'll temper back a smidge. I'll catch y'all next week. Thank you.